I remember hearing a story when I was younger, and frustratingly, I cannot recall its name, but it's about a king. And the kingdom was running well. There was lots of lovely food, there was music playing, there was peace. The kingdom was wealthy, people in the kingdom were healthy, everything was going as well as it could. And how did the king feel? Well, the king felt miserable. He was worried, he was anxious. A lot of the time he had low mood. And the queen noticed this and said, "What's wrong? Why are you so anxious? Why aren't you happy? This is a really good time for the kingdom." And the king's response was, "Things are going so well, sooner or later things are going to go wrong." In my experience, children who are in care, when they are placed into a nice placement, a placement with people who genuinely care, where people take an interest in them, where people listen to them and hear them, those children are like that king. They are waiting for it to go wrong. Their experience up to this point is usually that good things don't last. They get rejected. They get let down. People say they are going to do things and then don't. Sometimes they have been in placements before and then had to leave through no fault of their own, such as funding has run out. Sometimes they have done things, they've done behaviours that are soothing and make sense to them, but the placement doesn't see it like that. They don't like or want those sorts of behaviour, so they're asked to leave. So why should the placement that they're in, or just being put into, be any different? Why should this be any different to their lived experiences? So what happens is children are so used to being let down and rejected that they actually just want to get it over and done with. Very often they will want to break down the placement, so the tension of waiting for that placement to break down is over and done with. And I'm not too keen on this word sabotage. To me, the term sabotage, especially within the context of self-sabotage, means a conscious and intentional decision to undo or to stop your progress. And I'm not convinced that these children are purposely, with intentional and conscious awareness, are doing this. I think they're more automatic responses than that. When I hear people say a child has sabotaged their placement, I tend to hear it with a hint of blame in there. Blame toward that child that they have done this. They've done this on purpose, despite all of the efforts gone in to try and sort this placement out for them. Maybe I've just got that wrong, but it just doesn't sit right with me. I'd be interested in your thoughts using that phrase. Okay, so let's think about the basics of anxiety and what's going on here for the child. I'm going to draw this out on my iPad. I think that will probably be quite helpful. So if we think about what happens with anxiety. So if we draw out a very straightforward graph. So we have, let's say we have anxiety on this side, and this is how much anxiety someone is feeling. So that's low to high anxiety. And this is time. And then what's going to happen is anxiety starts low and then something happens. So let's say this child gets placed into a placement, and in their mind they're going, this place looks really nice, I really like the people, I don't want this to come to an end, but at some point it is going to come to an end because that's my learning history. Everything good always comes to an end and gets taken away from me. So they have those thoughts, it's going to get taken away. As time goes on, it's going to get taken away. When is it going to get taken away? It's going to get taken away soon. And you can see the anxiety is rising over time. As the anxiety rises towards high, this gets more uncomfortable. Okay, it gets more and more unpleasant, it gets more and more painful. Now, talking about anxiety in general, what tends to happen is we all experience this, where anxiety goes up and up and up. And then it gets to a point here where we just don't want it anymore. It's too much. We don't think we can hold it. We want to get rid of it. It's uncomfortable. So we do some kind of safety behavior. We do something that reduces that anxiety. So we might do a distraction technique. We might try to distract our minds with another activity. We might escape. So we might, if we're in a social context and we have some social anxiety, then we might leave. Because what happens is, we're in a social context, you can see the anxiety goes up and up and up. We decide at this point to leave, and then our anxiety drops really, really quickly because we've left. We're no longer in the anxiety provoking situation. And then what happens is, next time you're in an anxiety provoking situation, say you're out at a party and you think, oh, my anxiety is rising again. What happened your brain goes, what happened last time? Last time I left and then my anxiety dropped. So this time it does it earlier because it says there's no point waiting for your anxiety to get so high. We'll just let it get to here and then we'll leave. And then this drops the anxiety. What happens is it ends up getting earlier and earlier into the event to, at some point, your mind just goes, well, what's the point of even going? You're just going to end up leaving. You might as well just not go. And then you won't have to let the anxiety creep up because it won't have to, because you won't be there. And before you know it, you're avoiding the party completely. So no longer are you not going to the party and then escaping. You're now just not going at all because you have the anxiety of the anxiety. It's anticipatory anxiety. And this is what happens with these children. So let me erase some of this just because it's going to get a bit messy. So now we have, I'm going to be rejected, I'm going to be rejected, I'm going to be rejected soon, I'm going to be rejected. I can't take this anxiety anymore. I'm going to do something where I reject them. Here. And I'm not convinced this is in conscious awareness all the time. I think sometimes it might be, I think sometimes it's not. I think it depends on the child and how kind of self-aware they are. But what this might start to look like here in terms of behaviours are things like arguments with staff. So that relationship being ruptured. I've seen children throw cups, so throwing things at staff. I've seen fighting with other children who are there, breaking things. Missing curfews, if there's curfews in place. All sorts, there's a whole range of behaviours. And quite often what these behaviours are doing are they are essentially rejecting the placement before the placement can reject them. And then eventually what happens is, this is all too much, and the placement go, you have to leave. You're disrupting the other children. You're too risky for us. You've got to go. And when they get told they've got to go, the anxiety drops. Don't have to worry about being rejected anymore. It's happened. And this works well in the short term. It reduces the anxiety in the short term. But we know it brings with it long-term consequences. The mind doesn't think about the long-term consequences. The mind just wants to get rid of the anxiety as soon as it possibly can. So we have long-term consequences. And they are, well, there's nowhere to live. And just a side note here, while I think about this, is that this, rejecting the placement, gives some power and control to the child. The rejection has happened on their basis. But it ends up with these long-term consequences. They've got nowhere to live. Children's services or social services have to look for other placements because they've got a responsibility to find accommodation. But then what happens is this placement talks to this placement. And that brings with it some judgments about that child or what that child is like. So that means the tolerance for these behaviours up here is probably going to be lower because they're expected. They're expected to happen. So this puts a child in a really difficult position. And we've got to also think about the complexity of human behaviour here. It's not just this. This isn't just about rejecting the placement before the placement rejects them. There's loads of social factors involved here. Okay, so there's the internal experiences of what's going on for the child, but there's all these social factors. There's their peers. And their peers are quite often, they don't care about what's going on in the placement. They just want to spend time with the child. They want to go out. They want to go out and spend time with them. Quite often that looks like drinking, that looks like drug taking. Quite often it puts them into positions where they can be quite easily exploited. So we can end up with drink, we can end up with drugs, we can end up with exploitation. Usually for money. And not only money, but there's also a sense of belonging. Okay, if you ever read any of Steve Hayes' work, he talks about every single person, every single human has this yearning for belonging. And this fulfills, I've written belonging, and this fulfills that yearning for belonging. So again, it's very short-term. Very short-term gain there, this belonging. The long-term consequences of exploitation are obviously horrendous. So this is what we see. And I think we need to formulate these behaviours. So when you have a child in a placement and they're displaying these behaviours, these arguments, destruction, fighting, breaking things, all those kind of things, we need to think about that in terms of the child wanting to get the placement over and done with before they get rejected. This is really hard for people who work in these care homes. It's really hard to work with a child who is doing these kind of behaviours to push you away, to purposely push you away so you don't get too close. It's hard. But please keep this in mind. It's not personal to you. If you work in one of these places, try to cultivate some compassion. Try not to be judgmental towards that child and work with them. Still be there for them if they display these behaviours. Don't reject them. If you can, don't. I know placements have their own policies and the way all of that is governed. I appreciate that some of it is out of some people's hands, but keep the child there, keep them safe. Show them that not all adults can't be trusted. Show them there are adults out there who are there for them, looking out for them, helping them, not rejecting them. So I hope that answers the question. The question was, why do some children self-sabotage their placements? And I hope this gives you some insight into that.